But I want to start by asking you guys, what did you miss the most? What did you miss the most? Seeing people. And talking to people. Yeah. Anybody. Yes. Other thoughts? What did you miss the most? Singing together. Yeah. And we're still not quite there yet. But it's sort of there. We did sort of singing today, masks and all that. But there's a lot of aspects of church. Church is very nuanced in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of things that go on, a lot of things to miss. Communion, which we have done, and yet we're not all here. We haven't communed with everyone. I miss the Bible class a lot. Just that interaction we get. This is one way, for the most part. You can yell at me afterwards if you want, and I'm good with that. But mostly it's one way. Where Bible class, you get to share your thoughts, and I miss that so much. And we'll get there, hopefully pretty soon. I don't know. We haven't even broached that yet when we're going to do that. But there's a lot going on at church, in church, as church. One of the few blessings, I think, and there are blessings, there always are blessings that come out of tragedies because God works there. And I think one of the blessings that came out of all this COVID stuff is the ability to see things in a new light, especially regarding church, but not just church. Just some examples are working from home. Lots of people are discovering, and companies are discovering, hey, it's more productive to work at home. We don't have to maintain parking lots. We don't have to maintain break rooms. We don't have all this stuff that we are taking care of that we don't have to, and maintain all these desks and office space things. So working at home is like, whoa, it's going to change a lot of people's lives. Hopefully, maybe for the better. Not everybody obviously can do that. You can't install a car all across the country, build a car like that. You can't do some things of that. You have to have a shop to do things or this and that. But there's a lot of jobs out there that they can do for home. So that's cool. What else is on my list here? I lost my list. Where is it? Education. I don't know if we've learned a lot about what's a better way to do it. We've learned what doesn't work and what might work and different things, but we've had to rethink education in an entirely new way. How do you teach when you're not face-to-face? Or maybe we're learning, can you? I don't know. But it gives you a chance to re-examine and rethink things that come up with some new solutions and different things. Healthcare. Who would ever thought you're going to go see your doctor, through a video? And now there's my doctor discovered my Graves' disease because he came around the back and was feeling my throat. Let's check out that thyroid thing. It's like, I'm glad he did that because he wouldn't have been able to do that. But there are a lot of things they've been able to do, and it's kind of revamping healthcare, which has been kind of running out of control cost-wise as a nation, and maybe they can contain some of that. But not just those things, church as well. It gives us a chance to think about and to examine, what is church really? What are we trying to do there? Is there a better way to do things? I really doubt that when church was first established, they had these little cups with a wafer in the top that you would take, Or even before that, I doubt that they had these trays with all these little holes to put cups in. And, church was different, and it's evolved over time. Hopefully we're holding on to the things that are principled and that are foundational to church, while we adjust things that are not. They're cultural, they're incidentals. How you take communion, I think, is is not that relevant overall, but all of a sudden today it becomes pretty relevant because we want to protect one another. But the fact that we do commune together is a command of the Lord. We don't fudge on that, but we find new ways to do things. And I think that's maybe one of the blessings that comes out of this, is we get a chance to rethink church. Easy to get in a rut. Easy to do what we've always done and not really think about, why are we doing it? What is this about? What is the purpose here? So we're going to do that today, and I'm thinking maybe next week too, a little bit, maybe a little different direction. So I used to tell my 10 and 11-year-old soccer players when I coached way back a long time ago that you learn more in a loss than you learn in a victory, especially in a blowout victory. When things are going great and you're beating the other team, mostly what you learn there is bad habits, because everything works, even if it's wrong. But when you lose, you can go back and say, what went wrong? What do we have to do different to be better? And I think that's where we at right here. We're suffering a loss. I'm not saying, hey, I can't wait to go through this again. I hated this. I don't like it at all. But can we learn from this? What could we do better to be church and to honor God in what we do? So that's, I think, the cusp that we're on as we come back together and we think about it. And maybe this is an individual thing as well as a community thing. But we've had a loss, and it hurt. I mean, sometimes I ached so bad to be together with you guys. But can we learn? And that's where we're at. So let's look at church. Let's look at church. So I went through the New Testament, and I read every passage in the New Testament and tried to get as much context as I would from the word church. And there's only one word. Sometimes there's like 5 different words, and okay, this is about this. There's only one word for church. Or at least church only comes from one word. Let me say it that way. It's the Greek word ekklesia. And basically it means to be called out. It comes from a compound word. I don't like to do Greek words very often because it tends to go over, but I feel like I need to here today. It's a compound word. The first part is ek, E-K. And it has a lot of applications, just like most prefixes do, the contempt or conversion or convection. Con can go a lot of different ways. Ek is like that. But basically it means from or out. Okay? From or out. And then kaleo means to call, or to call out loud, or to call forth. And so from that, the classic definition of church is the called out. The called out. It was not an exclusively religious word. In fact, it probably wasn't really a religious word at all originally. But today, you don't use church to apply to anything else but religious settings, right? Anybody know? I don't think of any application. But originally, it was just if you had a town hall meeting, you might say, hey, it's church. You're being called out. Or if you had a club meeting, or if you had any kind of gathering of people, it was church. And that word came to become the classic definition of assembling Christians together in order to worship God. There's a noun sense and a verb sense. Next week, I think we're going to focus much more on the verb sense of it. But today, more so on the noun. What is church? What is church? But like any word, it takes context to define it, okay? Words are just words, and their meaning can go a lot of different directions, but it's the context. And so from that, I did all that reading, and okay, where is it? How is it used? For example, context. Social distancing. What would that have meant 6 months ago? If 6 months ago somebody said to you, oh, we're going to be social distancing, you'd have gone, what are you talking about? It had no meaning, but it's the context of what we're going through together as a nation, as a world, that gives us its meaning. Now you say that, and almost everybody's going to know what you're going to talk about. First thing out of their mouth is probably going to be 6 feet. Like the germs get to 6 feet and they stop. I don't know. But anyways, that's social distancing. And we understand through the context of what's going on what that means. And so defining church, called out, okay, yeah, but that leaves a lot of room for definition, doesn't it, in terms of application and understanding. And so you just say, well, it's ek and it's kaleo, it's called forth, we've nailed it. We know the definition, we know what church is about, we know what to do. Well, hardly. We really need that context. Church is a way to both subjectively and nuancively, I don't know how to say that, to take a few words and help us to define it. Anyway, we need more. We need this context, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So what is the context for the word and its usage in the culture in which it began in? Well, to begin with only a couple of exceptions when the word church is used in the Bible, it does not refer to a building. I only found 2 examples, and one is really an obscure thing. I'm not even going to bring it up because really the word probably should have been translated congregation. Because it's talking about Moses gathering in the wilderness. So it's not even talking about New Testament church. It's an old use of the word. And the other one we'll get to in a little bit. But every time the word comes up, it's talking about called forth in terms of people. And yet today, if you say the word church, the first thing that's come to people's minds is, here's the church, here's the steeple, They're going to be thinking probably of a structure, a building. Are you going to church? And in their mind, they're thinking big building with high ceilings and some guy yakking all the time in front or something like that. But it's okay. I'm not going to demand people change their thinking on that. I just want them and you to understand that that's not what the Bible talks about when it says church. To me, it's sort of like when you talk about a bank. Is the bank about the structure? When you go to, I'm going to choose a bank. Oh, that's a pretty building. I think I'll put my money there. No, you're talking about banking, about storing, about keeping your money secure, a place to gather your money. You're going to bank. You're not really talking about the structure, and yet the word really means, in our language, in our culture, it means both. And church has developed into that where I'm okay with you talking about church as a building because it's awkward you got to call it something. And we do have an address and we do meet here, usually, weekly. So let's go to the church, or let's go to church. Let's go. The word can mean assemble. Let's go to assembly. That gets more into the verb aspect of it, though. But it's never used that way. It's always talking about the gathering of people. So you can go to church in the sense that you're going to gather, but it's about you. It's not about wood pews versus chairs or stucco versus wood or whatever. It's not the structure, it's the people. So, if it's not a building, what is it? It's a community of people. The word now has exclusive religious application, but originally was not the case. Let's go to Matthew 16, verse 18. This is the first time the word shows up in the New Testament, in the Bible, because it's not used as church, obviously, that's Greek. Old Testament is Hebrew, mostly. In Matthew 16, verse 18, here's where it comes up. Only 2 times in all the Gospels, and both in Matthew, is church used. And here Jesus says, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So you think Jesus, well, after all, Jesus was a carpenter, so you think, I'm going to build my church. Where's the lumber? Where's the hammer? Let's get busy. Let's build. That's not what he's talking about. If it was, he failed, because he left and never built anything like that, as far as we know. He's talking about building a community, the very thing that God has always done from the beginning, to pull people into community. I will build my church. His focus was on calling people out of a relationship not centered on God into a relationship with God and fellow God worshipers and servers. In chapter 18 of Matthew, verse 17, he says this. It's talking about conflicts. You have a brother who sins against you and he's not forgiving. And so what do? You go to him and talk to him. If he doesn't listen to you, you bring it to the church. Look at verse 17. If you refuse to listen to them, tell it to the church. Can you see somebody out on the front stoop yelling at the building? Hey, this guy hasn't repented, church building. What are you going to do about it? What's he talking about? Church, you tell it to the assembly. You tell it to the people, the called out group. And so the church is us. Okay, remember, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door. Here is the church. Here is the church. The church could be in a church building. The church could be in a park. The church could be at home. The church could be at work. Because we are the church. We are a part of the community. So a lot said about that throughout the book of Acts because, of course, Paul is preaching and churches are starting and beginning and being ministered to. And so there's a lot in the book of Acts. Let me take you through a few of those things. Look at Acts chapter 2 in the very beginning as it starts on the day of Pentecost. I'll get to Acts here in a minute. Luke, John, Acts. There we go. Acts 2:47. He says this. In 46, and the day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts. This is talking about the new Christians. Praising God and having favor with the people, and the Lord added to their number. Now, in the King James, that uses the word church. That's probably wrong, a wrong translation. But tell me, when Jesus is building his church and he adds people, what do you think he's adding it to? I think it's wrong in translation, but I think it's accurate in conception. Jesus adds to his church those who are being saved. In Acts chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, Saul approved of his execution. This is when Philip stands up and preaches, and he begins to tell the Jews that you have crucified Jesus, and you're corrupt, and they don't like it, and so they stone them. And Saul stands there and holds the garments of Stephen while they kill him by stoning, approving of the process. That's the whole point of that. And there arose that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered through the regions of Judea. Once again, very clear evidence we're not talking about a structure. The structure was not being persecuted. The structure was not being scattered. There weren't hey, I'll take that brick and you take that brick and we'll spread it out all over the country. We're not spreading out a building. I'll take a 2x4, you take a 2x4, and we'll tear apart this church. We're persecuted. No. It's the people. The gathering, the called out, who are being persecuted. And then they're scattered. I think that's an interesting note that has maybe a small amount of parallel to where we are today, because we've been scattered. We've been scattered. So, did we stop being the church? They didn't seem to have stopped being the church. Instead, what they did, as they were scattered because of the persecution, they took the story of Jesus with them, and the church was replanted all over the world. Church actually grew more that way than if they'd stayed huddled together. And so the question is, at least a question, not the question today, have we been, as we've been scattered, taking the gospel with us into our homes, in our neighborhoods, so others can see and hear who we are and see our Lord through us? In verse 3, he goes on to say, but Saul was ravaging the church and entering house after house. He dragged off men and women and committed them to prison. Again, the church, the gathering of people. In chapter 11:22, it says that the report came to the ears of the church. I love that expression. The ears of the church. Anybody see the ears of the church? What's he talking about? He's not talking about that the church building has ears. Maybe we have a mouth, we have some speakers. That could be the mouth of the church, I guess. But no, buildings don't have ears. People have ears. And so it came to the knowledge of them. And so then you see the nuance of language and how it's used in this case. The church clearly, and I've made the case maybe to the absurd, but the church is about a gathering and a community of people, not a structure. And that's why I recorded sermons in so many different locations while we were apart. Because it wasn't about me standing here because now I'm in church. It was about me speaking to you, encouraging you, helping teach you, and helping you to think about the things of God. And I didn't want it to be about this room, this building, because that's not what we're about. It's a convenient place. I love the architecture in here. It's a comfortable place, unless it gets really, really hot. But this isn't church. We don't have to be here to do church. And so I did church in a park. I did it on the home farm. Where else did I do it? Classroom in the basement, that storage room. I did it in my home. Cemetery. Where else? Cemetery. At the cemetery on Easter. Yeah. We can be the church, and we are the church. If there's a point I want you to hear above anything else, is that it's what we are. COVID can't take that away. Satan can't take that away. Nobody can take away the designation of who we are. We are the assembly of God's people. We wear the name Church of Christ. We prefer not to think of it so much as a name as it is the description. We want to be the called out people of Jesus Christ. Yeah, it makes a nice name. The Bible talks about the churches of Christ greet you. Okay, good enough, fair enough. But that's not the name. Paul's not saying, here's the name you should use. He's saying, we belong to Jesus. That is our identity. It's not our address. It's our identity. We are the church. Let me end with just a few quick, I'm going to go through this really quickly. Three, maybe four biblical metaphors that the Bible uses for church. And I said I'd get back to this, and I will in just a moment. The first metaphor of the church, to help us understand who we are as church, is that the church is a body. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 12 through 15, let me get there again quickly. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12. For just as the body is one and has many members, all the members of the body, though many, are the body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, Jews and Greeks, slaves and free. We're all made to drink of the same Spirit. Ephesians says the one body, which is the church. Okay, it makes that connection very directly. Here, I think it's assumed. But we are a body, and he uses that analogy. It's used here in Ephesians, it's used in Romans. Frequently, the church is a body. A body has various parts. They are different. He goes on here to say, just because I'm not a hand or I'm not an eye does not make me less a part of the body if I'm something different. We have different parts. We are different parts. We bring different things to the mix, which is good. Because he goes on to say, how great would it be if we were all a leg? Well, maybe we could jump high, but that's all we could do. We can jump high and we can kneel. We need each other. That's what makes a community. That's what makes a body. So the church is a body. That metaphor helps us understand the nuance of who we are. What is our identity? I'm a part of a body. I'm not the whole body. It's not me. I'm not the church. You're not the church. But together we are, because we're a body made up of different parts. Number two, that's a major theme throughout Ephesians, by the way. If I'm prone to series, which I am, could be the next one, but probably not. Anyway, number two, the church is a family. The church is a family. Time won't allow me to go through passages that talk about how the church called themselves brothers and sisters. We're even Jesus is our brother. God is our Father. That goes way back in old history, into the Old Testament. God, the Father. And we are the children of God. We're a family. And again, there's so much we can learn about our identity as church by understanding family. We learn something about our Father God. We learn something about our role as being his children and our role as being brothers and sisters to one another in Christ. So again, that's a whole series right there. If you want to write down a text to read, go to Matthew 12, 48 through 50. I'm not going to read it now. And number three, here's the one I said I'd come back to. The one place where church is a building. It's in Ephesians chapter 2. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 19 through 22. He says, "For through the law I died to the law so that I might live to God." No, I'm in Galatians. That's why it's not sounding right. Next book, Galatians 2, 19 through 20. This looks better. So then you are no longer strangers or aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, family of God, so that's theirs as well. And you are built on a foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus himself being the cornerstone, in whom the whole structure being joined together grows into a holy temple. Some translations put church there, and that's why, a holy church to the Lord. In him you are being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. The church is a building, but it's a metaphor for us. So the only place you can find in the Bible where the church is referred to as a building, it's a metaphor. We are like a stone structure, which they would have had in that day. The temple of their day had these great big huge rocks, but one rock doesn't make a temple. You need to put them together, and you need to have a cornerstone. We're built on Jesus. And so this teaches us about our identity as a church. We all hold each other together. There's a cornerstone. There's a foundation of the teaching of the apostles and prophets. And finally, we are the bride of Christ. Just did a wedding for these fine folks here, April and Robert. That was fun. A week ago yesterday? 2. Yeah, I feel better because like me. 2 weeks ago, they were married, and we read through Ephesians chapter 5 about husbands and wives, and at the end of that he says, you know what, I'm really talking about Christ and the church. We are the bride of Christ. And we learn something about our relationship with God and each other in that way. And on we could go. As I was finishing up, I was looking at something and realized, we're a flock, we're sheep. And so these are not the only metaphors, but these are here to help us understand and grow and appreciate our role as church. I just want you to know we didn't stop being church. We didn't stop doing church, because church is not limited to what happens in this setting. Church is where we love one another, where we bear one another's burdens. Church is where we care for the needy and the most vulnerable of our society, the widows and orphans. Go get a concordance and read the one another passages. That's church. And I know that stuff was going on outside these walls in the last 3 months. I know some specifics, and there's a lot I don't know what you were doing, but I know you, and I know you were doing it. You were caring for one another. You were caring for others. You were displaying the love and forgiveness of Jesus to a world that needs to see and hear that. That's church. That's church. Don't hang your head low that, we've missed all this church. Yeah, there was loss there. I get that. It hurt. Just as when the church was scattered in Acts chapter 8, there was great loss there. Oh no, we have to leave Jerusalem and our friends are scattered. And yet, God was honored in that. Things happen. Things come and go. But nothing outside of ourselves can stop us from wearing the identity of church and living out the identity of church.